This podcast is recorded on Aboriginal land. We pay our respects to elders past and present and recognise that sovereignty was never ceded.
Hello, welcome back to the Radical Online Leftist Pipeline podcast. I am not Mitch Alexander. I am Jordan Vandenlam, also known as Purple Fingers. I'm joined with...
I'm also not Mitch Alexander. I'm Tom Tanicki. Sorry.
No, you fucked me up. I'm Celeste Little.
Excellent. I also realised I meant to say I'm joined by. That is poor grammar. Also, because Mitch isn't here, everything's fallen apart. The wheels have fallen off the carriage. We don't have a list of things to talk about, but we have a list of things that we'd like to talk about. They're just not written down. So what should we start
with? We have fire. We have passion. Do we not?
Indeed.
We have things to offer the world.
And an internet connection.
Yes, that's right. What more do we need?
Well, and we have an imminent election announcement.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Let's get this fucking over with, for Christ's
When's
sake.
it going to happen now? Sorry, come off a bit like a
Look, I think the most likely date, I would say, would be the 10th of May. If I'm wrong, then whatever. But I will be overseas, so I've got to try and figure out how to vote as a silent elector in another country.
That's going to happen for you. Hey? Oh, you're going to have to hit up an embassy or something. Hey, isn't that what they do?
Yeah,
true.
As if you know, I really want to be going to an Australian embassy when I'm in another country, not being Australia.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
and
that sounds like fun, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Quite inconvenient. Like, I wish you could just kind of settle it now. But no, we don't have all the candidates and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, well, pre-poll will open eventually, but probably while you're overseas. So
yes.
You'll miss that too. Awesome. Celeste, do you want to talk about Tony Armstrong?
Do I know? Tom, I'll let Tom bring it up, actually.
Tom, do you want to start that off?
Look, I don't want to talk about... you know what? All I have to say about Tony Armstrong is he seems really rad.
Yeah, I fucking love him.
That's it. What I want to say about a recent clip, which I don't... It says that it was partly written by him. I don't really... Okay, so there was a clip. Look, it was created... it seems to me, I don't really know the ins and outs. It seemed to be created by some of the people. Like, the videos helped to be produced by some of the people who had something to do with Auntie Donna's stuff. You know, it's got all the trappings of like a lefty-aimed, anti-racist kind of comedy.
It's quite funny. It's quite funny.
Yeah, it makes you do the laughing thing. And it's basically Tony Armstrong suggesting an app due to, you know, in response to, and I see the context of the article, Tony, being that he's a charming,
beautiful,
and prominent,
I might
indigenous, beautiful, charming,
he is ridiculously beautiful.
Yeah, stunning.
Very charming, indigenous, public figure. He, you know, adjusted to sports, entertainment, and that kind of thing, and media, and he cops a huge amount of abuse from racists for no other reason that he's occasionally states his political views, which are just normal ones, but
exactly.
You know, racists don't like those things, and he's just become one of these targets, you know. And but he's no shrinking violet. He's not a weak response to that, and I've always seen him go and respond and have a go back at these people, you know, in a way that doesn't, you know, he doesn't get consumed by it, which is good, but he does respond to it, and
he's largely supported when he responds by his, you know, the organisations that employ him, which is
nice to see, and certainly doesn't happen all the time in this country, does it? Yeah. So in that context, he's done a video, and it's the bit is that it's about an app to help racists spell properly. And it's particularly... So, again, you know, he's very funny, he's very charming. You could put him in many different bits and what have you. He'd make a great figure to do that kind of thing with. But it shat me. And the reason that it shat me is because this thing that lefties do, they've been doing to my knowledge, ever since, and probably long before I was ever part of like active left stuff, which is to focus on the idiocy and the poor spelling of racists. The reason it shits me is because, you know, it's still enshrined. We've actually discussed this before in this pod. Like, I know we've at least alluded to it. I could go on about it all day personally, but it's still enshrined in that worldview that says, like, racism is a product of idiocy. You know what I mean? Being a backwards, outer suburban, uneducated bogan.
Like a class, it's a class issue. Like only you know, if you're not educated, then you're racist. Yeah.
Rather than it being a matter of powerful people. My understanding of racism is that powerful people leverage racism in order to create more power for themselves. It is a tactical racism is very much a thing in politics, particularly doing very well these days. And then poor people, you know, it's to help them feel that they've, you know, to accrue a sense of power that might not actually be backed up by any actual material change in your circumstances, but the broke white person can still feel that they've got a crumb insofar as they feel they earn the spoils of the racist pyramid scheme, you know, the ideology of racism. And so when we peddle that kind of thing, we don't change any of the real. We don't even. I mean, if we fail to apprehend what racism actually is, then we say stuck in this thing. We're just responding to it in kind. We're actually just scrapping with other people and going, "You're like that because you're stupid." Racism ain't a matter of how incorrectly people spell. And if it were just this skit, then this would just be me being a fucking a naysaying whiner, but I've seen this theme come up time and again. My first contribution to left stuff was as we mentioned on here, Million Flag Patriots. Well, I used to play a character who, you know, it was because I was running a Facebook page, this character. I would always write as him online. He was a fake far-right patriot. And I would spell things wrong. He was a rough and ready figure, and, you know, his caps key was stuck on his keyboard, so he'd write in all caps. I wasn't really trying to make him a serial incorrect speller, but he wasn't a highly educated person. This is just the character that he was. But I quickly began noticing that when you spell a word wrong, a lot of lefties, their critical thinking faculties shut down. And they have to start correcting you for the spelling. They don't actually realise that you're not the real deal, or you're having a laugh or what have you. They get caught up in that trap. And ever since then, that was nearly 10 years ago now, I've just noticed this time and again, and I don't like it. And I wanted to say that I wish it would fucking stop. I hate it. This spell check lefty shit. I'm fucking over it. That's what I wanted to say. What did you want to say?
Yeah. Look, allow me to swing in here. So I'm just going to start by saying Tony Armstrong cops a lot. And the dude is magnificent. I love him, love what he does, love his energy. Wish I had you know, a fraction of that on any given moment of any day. Cause he's just so charismatic and so vibrant and talented. And he pulls the crowd through this. But Tony Armstrong cops the racism that he does because he is black and in the public eye. And that's all there is to it. You know, it happens over and over again. And somebody who is also black and in the public eye, I can't think of a time where my life hasn't been impacted by racism. It started from the time I interacted with other people as a child all the way up to now. But with regards to the clip and with regards to what really jumped out at me, there's this the discussions around racism in this country are exceptionally lazy and exceptionally erroneous. There's a lot of misdirection when it comes to discussion of racism. A good percentage of the Australian public cannot envisage racism existing unless somebody calls someone a mean word or
a slur,
it has to be a slur or it has to be some sort of act. It's not something that
can't
actually
be systemic.
It's not something that exists and impacts somebody's life all the damn time. And therefore, you know, this argument that, that racists are uneducated, working class, like, you know, there's that bogan tag. So they're uneducated, working class individuals who need to be pulled into line because clearly they're too ignorant to not be racist, just keeps on permeating over and over again. But, you know, the ad itself, I found it hilarious. It was funny, but it was also a very surface level discussion on racism. We need to get a bit real here, when talking about racism, because when it boils down to it, being called a word by some sort of bogan who can't spell, and as somebody, you know, who comes from a working class background herself, that impacts my life as an Aboriginal person a lot less than what generations of government policy have done to my family. It impacts my life a lot less than, say, ruling class individuals setting the agendas in educational institutions like universities and propagating knowledge systems like eugenics or like anthropology or, you know, all these other sorts of groups that have used Indigenous knowledges and used Indigenous peoples to essentially promote colonial supremacy over generations. Most of the racism that I have experienced has actually been highly educated people on the left. And the reason why that is because my daily experience is actually framed by hanging around with highly educated people on the left.
Yeah. Do you want to unpack that a little bit, like for people who don't know that, you know, what you do?
So I'm a union organizer, but I'm also a public progressive. I've been a writer and social commentator for a very, very long time now.
You work with tertiary educated teachers.
Well, tertiary educated people in general, because that's, and, you know, I entered the system myself as a student in 1997. So my entire adult life has been framed by tertiary educated people, essentially, and those interactions. But, you know, when you're walking around the average uni campus, it just jumps out at you how many buildings are named after people that were eugenicists or were prominent, say, medical professors who tested in lock hospitals, or I'm using lock hospitals. I can't name an example of that, but I will say that there are, you know, there's people who, they exist. These sorts of knowledges were celebrated to the point where people have monuments, buildings and that named after them within this, within educational institutions. I think also, you know, things like, the Australian Constitution, you know, the governance structures of this nation were all framed and informed to reinforce white supremacy. And, you know, we're not like, you know, it is such, when you've got this amount of structures working against somebody's life, and these structures have been put in place by working class individuals to reinforce their superiority and do so at the cost of people of colour, of working class people and all of that. It is actually in their interest to ensure that the people of colour and the working class people are busy taking pot shots at each other so that they ignore the fact that these are very embedded systems. Racism is a very embedded system that that serves to maintain the supremacy. So yeah, I mean, my daily interactions, if I was to talk about the average working class bogan, you know, maybe people can't spell and all of that, but when it's boiled down to it, that whole acceptance as an individual and that whole take people on face value thing certainly happens a lot more with the people that are being blamed in those sorts of sketches for being the propagators of racism than it does the people with power.
Exactly. Yeah. And I just want to say, like, as a socialist, like, we know that for capitalism to succeed, it needs racism. It needs racism to fuel itself, because without racism and without sexism particularly, it's harder to exploit people. And that's how the system works. And by us, if we consider ourselves, anti-capitalists or on the left, by blaming racism and scapegoating racism as a product of just stupidity, rather than an intentional systemic thing that capitalism needs to survive, we give people like perhaps colleagues that you work with who are incredibly intelligent, we give them a free pass and say that, you can't be racist actually because you're incredibly intelligent, when they're the people benefiting the most from racism.
Mm-hmm.
And they're kind of, it's the more insidious type of racism, even if they're not, potentially ruling class individuals or whatever. By giving, working class people and someone else, another working class person to blame and pit against each other, they benefit, not us. It's never been the case. So yeah, I feel like us calling racists stupid is classist. I don't think it's beneficial. And I feel like we're letting the people who are to blame off the hook there. Sorry, I just wanted to have a little statement about that.
I'm on board with you, man. I've got this reflexive thing where I want to sort of go like, I feel this internal pressure to sort of go, but don't worry, guys, we're not trying to take the jokes away. Like, it's not like I'm not like trying to rain on the parade of having a laugh. I think that comedy is, I spent many years trying to use laughs, comedy, and things like that as an auxiliary thing to inspire literal activist movements. So I'm the last guy. And that's not what none of us are doing. That's not about that. Fuck the skit. Forget about the fucking skit itself. The ideas, as I said before, predate this one. This is just another iteration. And then when I look in there and I see the amount of comrades and people like that of mine on board, and I'm not shaming people for enjoying a funny video or what have you.
No, I enjoyed it.
Ideas, they persist before it and after it. They need to be combated, because some of these things, these tropes, actually probably made more sense in the mid-2010s when the spell check lefties were really having a day in the sun. Nascent, grassroots, far-right street movements then were very rough and ready, working class. If you were looking for these clips of dumb people, you had a lot of fodder, you know what I mean? You had a lot of that. There were some people doing some really rough and ready shit back then, Nowadays, we got to get with the fucking times, though, man. Nowadays, these people are aiming for political parties. Here, there's going to be, I'm not joking, there's going to be a White Australia party. That's going to happen. They're going to try to get it to happen. You mark my words.
Well, there already is. Like in the debate with that I had with Warren Pickering from One Nation, he literally said in the 30s we wouldn't have even been considered extreme. We would have just been regular conservatives. And it's like, well, what was going on in the 30s, mate? Was there something happening there?
There's a reason your heroes fucking died, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, died and got left behind. It's because we chose to do that. And these people want to make that some object of mawkish nostalgia. These people are educated. Nationalists, far right, One Australia advocates, angling to get into Parliament, into law, into, to become doctors and pharmacists. All this is happening. These people that got, radicalised, if you want to call it that, but they got scooped up by the mid-2010s when they were all idiots and we were spell checking them. And now they are becoming, managers and professionals. They really, really are, with an actual agenda on their hands. And if we're going to sit there, well, there's not going to be any more spelling to check because they're going to be in power. And I'm not saying... what I'm saying is that comedy is meant to be the art of like playing with the known and making unconventional observations. Well, this shit's been happening since time immemorial. We've got to put this to bed because we've got to get with the times. These people are smarter than they used to be, and I believe in the role of comedy in it. But it can't be played out shit if you're going to actually use comedy for an end. It's got to be a bit more up to the time. So I say all of that, and again, just as we sort of said at the start, like. Leave the skit behind. The spit got me mad, but it was the ideas underpinning it and some of the writing, what I mean?
Yeah.
They need to be put to bed. But Tony Armstrong, strength to strength, absolute legend.
Yeah. I mean, that was me too. I think the people were sharing it and they were enjoying it. And there's nothing actually wrong with that if they're not interrogating what it is that it's saying to them. And to use a very individual example, when I was a political candidate, a good chunk of the crap that I had to cop came from white lefties who are highly educated, saying, "How dare you throw your hat in the ring, the Democratic ring, against this lovely grandma?" Essentially, they were, I was targeted more than any other candidate across the entire country that was running for the Greens. I
wonder why that is.
Yeah. What set me apart?
Yeah.
What set me apart? I was a black person in the public eye, and these same people then turned around and were champions for the yes vote for the referendum as a way of stating, look at us, we're really not racist, but yet they had perpetrated over and over again. So, if you're going to share that sort of stuff, interrogate what it is that you're sharing and just reflect a bit more because certainly some of the messages I get out of that is that we are saying that working class people or that those who don't have the opportunity to have a gigantic education, excellent education, are the perpetrators when that's not the fact. The people who reinforce these structures are.
Exactly. And like to conclude on my end, I think as a piece of art or a piece of comedy, it was fucking great, fucking hilarious. As a strategy to combat racism, I think it's ineffective. But I also would say that I don't know and I don't think that Tony presenting it as, this is the most effective way to combat racism, to call racists stupid. So, yeah, I think it was probably just a funny video in my perspective, and it was.
Ultimately, I just want to use call-out culture to kill comedy.
100%. Get rid of it. Make comedy illegal.
I was named several times in a Weekend Australian article back in 2019.
Beautiful.
The article is call-out culture killing comedy, and I was called a social activist who's trying to get... Basically, there was an act in, I think it was the Melbourne Fringe Festival in 2019, and just the same year where I think I had a show, maybe, or 2018. But it's this white woman, and she just had the most... It was like a 1940s Mickey Rooney-ass pantomime of Asians. She had, kimonos in there. She was doing this. There was
Oh, yeah. I remember this one.
Stuff? Yeah. It was just all these shitty-ass, old, naff, outdated, sort of like... Not pan-Asian in the racist way of I don't actually know the difference between Chinese and Japanese people. It was breathtaking, and it was shockingly unfunny, but I've never really been someone to go, we need to do a petition and get everything shut down. Now, other people did that, you know what I mean? And I was fine with that. But from my perspective, I don't really do that kind of thing, you know what I mean? I'd rather I've always come from the perspective of racists we need to develop the town commons, you know what I mean, the collective of all of us, and then we need to sit there in that big commons where we all agree that we don't want racists in there.
Exactly. Let them hang themselves. That's how it should work.
Yeah, but we need to agree that that's fucked, and, we can't you let them hang themselves. We're not saying we're going to hang them, nor that we're going to get the fucking cops onto them or whatever, certainly, you know what I mean? Or like fucking immigration or whatever. We're just saying, no, we don't like that. And so I was mostly about doing that. Look how shitty this is. This is 1940s ass fucking, you know, like... And then I got put into this article, so because I can't resist it, because of course the right wing take is that you need to be seen as the curmudgeon who's actually trying to get everything banned, even if you never say don't ban, even if you never say ban anything, they'll still render you as that because that's their goal. Anyway, now that we've killed some more comedy, what's next? So you hate the Greens, hey, Jordan?
Long story short, yep.
You just don't quit, do you? You know, you're just thirsty for their blood, aren't you? The Greens 5 days ago announced that they'd be reallocating $4 billion from some savings. So this is a response to AUKUS. They're going, we're going to scrap AUKUS. And we're going to spend, instead of the $77 billion from that, we're going to spend $4 billion on locally creating arms for defense. Defense, as in like not Department of Defense that actually goes over, spends most of its time offending in the Middle East and around the world. But, so localized manufacture of arms, as I understand it anyway, for strictly defensive purposes. That was the announcement, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And I want to preface it by saying, ending AUKUS is a fantastic idea. And we should definitely do that. But as a few people have said, that's not even a progressive idea. Like, that's a bad conservative policy. Even Malcolm Turnbull's rubbished it. Bob Carr, Paul Keating, Labor Right have rubbished it. Like, it's an objectively, good idea to end AUKUS.
AUKUS,
Don't need to replace it with our own weapons manufacturing spending. But I also want to say, so I was critical of their policy quite loudly, and I have been critical of the Greens quite a few times, and like, in my opinion, obviously, rightfully so, but that's my opinion. But whenever I am critical of the Greens, I get a really interesting response, and it's the response that the Greens get when they're critical of Labor. Exactly. And it's like, why it's leftist infighting. It could be worse, could be Dutton, in this case, could be AUKUS, and all that kind of stuff. And my response was, it's not leftist infighting to criticize an imperialist policy. I just don't think, think anyone who considers themselves on the left should be supporting weapons manufacturing in this country. And that's not because I think, we should get world peace or whatever. This is something that we discussed just before this. I think world peace is a liberal idea. I think it's one in which, we can all strive to, so that we can keep selling our little commodities and keep the flow of capital going. I think that when there is violence, and we have a duty to respond to people being oppressed, like we're seeing in Palestine, in Gaza specifically. I think we have a duty to respond with violence. I think we should be intervening there as a nation with the ability to do so. But we know that this country particularly would never do that. In fact, we have throughout history we've been on the side of the oppressor, oppressing the oppressed. And we will continue to do so. So I don't think we should be advocating for policies that strengthen our ability to oppress people. And that's my position.
So $4 billion of localized expenditure for what's
missiles
stated as being... Yeah, what's stated right now in a policy platform as being strictly defensive, purposes, contributed towards an ADF that historically has used for anything but. Well, certainly not just for defensive, but also for offending around the world.
Force projection is the forward defense. That's our thing.
Yeah, which is offense. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
And so $4 billion contributed towards a broken organization like that, you're saying, without any overarching systemic or deep reform or whether you want to call it, well, we can talk about reform versus abolition, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Big change. Yeah. You're saying that's just more of the same.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like the argument, like it's an argument that, not all cops are bastards, the kind of thing, in our broken system. It's like, oh, actually, maybe we do need some more cops, kind of thing. I don't think that's a good argument. It's also like, I spoke on a weapons panel with literally next to Shoebridge, where he described any spending on defense as dead money that goes into a pool of our economy and does nothing, particularly if we actually use it for defense instead of offense. Doesn't help anyone. We literally just it goes nowhere to die. We have no enemies. The Defense Force and its strategic review regularly says there is no chance in hell of an invasion where we'd ever use those missiles. David Shoebridge himself on that same panel said it's a ridiculous notion to say that, because of America's increasing insanity, we should create our own defensive umbrella. He said that this is what the Conservatives were arguing, and now he's arguing for the same thing. It's just, and also with Greens policies, we know how they work. Greens are not majority governments. Greens will put a policy forward that has a baked-in negotiation available. So, some of the policy positions are, no export, only defense, all those kind of things. What do you think will be the first to go for that policy to actually be successful? Which aspect of it do we reckon will go? And I think we know exactly what's going to go. We're not going to manufacture missiles here and then just let them sit when we can profit from them.
Sitting around here.
Yeah, our ruling class is just not like that.
So is this a negotiation? Is this a step towards the Greens? Do you think? I don't know. Or do you guys think this is happening because it's the Greens starting to contemplate what majority government reform? Is that what that looks like? Is that why they're doing this?
Look, and I think it's reasonably well known that I'm a former Greens candidate and former Greens member as well. But I would say that electoralism has played into this, trying to, as we said at the top of this episode, there is an election around the corner. This is an announcement that is happening mere days before we're going to get the announcement of when that election is. It is, I would state, a calculated move to try and gain some ground in what is an increasingly conservative playing field when it comes to power. And it's also not the first time that within the Greens this sort of action is happening. Whilst Jesus were talking, I started having thoughts, and I remembered before I did become a candidate, there was the increasing action on Invasion Day. This is going to sound like the weirdest parallel I'm going to draw yet. Increasing action on Invasion Day, the support from Greens factions, particularly the more social justice minded factions that were popping up at the time, and Richard Di Natale referring to the burning of the Australian flag as an act of violence. Now, I was annoyed.
When did he do that?
That was 2017-ish, I think.
I should have remembered that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did he? So it's a funny time for a Greens person to be doing. They hadn't. That was a few years before they'd attempted the Black Greens process, and wasn't it? And they hadn't really. Yeah.
Yeah. And there was some ground that had been gained in inner city seats and all that sort of stuff. So this was kind of a grab to look a little bit more mainstreaming at a time when other actions were coming up. This seems to be the same. It also runs parallel, I think. In the last week, Jackie Lambie, in response to the tariffs on the aluminium or the metals announcements from the Trump administration, talked about shutting down Pine Gap as a way of dodging that. There's actual, that caused all sorts of stuff. But to be honest, if you're looking for an ultimate BDS move or, to try and shut down, to try and make an impact on America, shut down those sorts of, imports and that, then shutting down Pine Gap would actually
would be it.
That was an incredible announcement, and it's just kind of it's got sort of put to the side as some sort of lunatic statement, but it wasn't. I would say that what we're seeing is some sort of grab in a very conservative playing field at a time when the government is playing for the middle ground rather than anything socially progressive, to try and gain a little bit back from that by the Greens in order to enter into a power sharing agreement. They have stated that getting into some sort of power sharing agreement through minority government would be a goal for them.
So we talked about how you need to go in and you need to change the defence thing radically. Abolish or radically reform or this spectrum of things that sort of bleed into each other.
Well, not even that. We'd need to change our mode of production, because under capitalism, there's no way that we could have a reformed defence force that actually does good things. I don't think we would get that. We need to get a defence force that acts in response. That acts with the principles of international working class solidarity. We're unable to achieve that under a capitalist mode of production, in my opinion. I don't know. Open to that being a reality. Doubt it's the case.
Yeah, but you are someone who's running for politics as part of a party who, your stated belief is that you're not willing to. You've explained this many times. You're not intending on compromising on your polity or socialist politics in order to.
Yeah, I'm not here to get some power, like do deals and shit like that. No, not if it's against the interests of the working class. That's not, I'm not interested in forming a supply agreement with a major party so that we can have a ministerial position and get a little bit more money for some fucking socialist senator. That's fucking ridiculous.
And even if it runs contrary to the kind of the dare I say Machiavellian, or power first kind of machinations of or machinery of modern politics. That's the way you're approaching it, and that's the way people in your party are approaching running for politics. It's like, do not compromise on the left-wing politics, make a case for them. So it shouldn't be a surprise, I guess, then to hear you make this case, or to argue with the Greens in this way, right?
Exactly. I work with the Greens heaps. Big fan of the Greens. And obviously have critical support for the Greens. Far more critical support than I have for the Labor Party or the Liberal Party or any of the other right parties. But it was pretty astounding to see there was a literal intervention. There was an intervention online coming from the Greens, but not just the Greens. Some socialists, a large number of anarchists even, And that was probably the most surprising. The anarchists saying like, oh, so you don't reckon we should have a military and that kind of thing. It's like, well, that's a surprising perspective from an anarchist particularly. And like, obviously, big fan of anarchists, work with them lots, and we share far more political perspectives than I do with literally anyone else, except for socialists. But yeah, the online intervention from the Greens, because I was being mean to their party, not because I was opposing, an imperialist weapons production policy, but it was because I was being mean to the Greens. And I wasn't even being mean. I was like, this is not good. We shouldn't do this. That was surprising to me.
The idea that we should not be interrogating or having these discussions on the left, because somehow asking questions or providing challenges breaks down left-wing solidarity. I think that it's actual horseshit. We need to be having these robust discussions. If we're going to get the left and be a left, and, it's not a monolith, but we've got a basic set of principles that make us be left, then we actually do need the space to be having these discussions and challenging these things where they don't necessarily fit in with what we'd say are the ideologies that actually drive us, that make us, that attracted us to be the left. And I don't think that this is, because it is weapons manufacture, because it is within the capitalist system. I think it does warrant interrogation if this is going to be a platform that they're taking.
I totally agree. And I think we should all be doing it just like if it was Victorian socialists announcing, a weapons manufacturing policy. I think we should all be jumping up and down on our chairs about it. Regardless of whether we're a member or not.
I mean, we can model chats on this podcast that don't err into debates, right? You know what I mean? I think we've had our little differences.
We've had some good ones.
We're still getting off our feet. It's still early days. Perhaps, I don't know. Do we want to? Is there Greens folk that we can have a chat to in this space about this? Is this? It's and I mean without it being another fucking spat. You know what I mean? Like not online. Perhaps this is a conversation we could have people in this space going forward.
That's not a bad idea. I'm totally open to that.
Actually, there's two things I'm open to, because, if we've got an election, then there is an opportunity to actually get people and to interrogate the ideas of candidates that we actually like from the left. So we can have those conversations.
Let's get Tara on. Fuck yeah.
Look, I'm all for getting Tara on. I'm not going to lie, but also it's just sort of, oh God, you've now got me thinking about how much fun it might be one day to just have a controversial views that you individually hold as a leftist activist episode, because I'm sure that if we just threw our controversial views in the mix and started debating those, that would be incredibly interesting.
Let's do that. Can we? We're now making that a listener question. So if you have a controversial view that you hold as a leftist, for example, arming the working class or others, let's hear it. Send it to us at, what is it, ALPDOTGOV at, I don't fucking remember.
Mitch.
This is going to have to get edited in afterwards. And
Mitch,
Mitch,
put it
if
in
you're
the
editing
chat.
this in, you can shame us.
Love you, Mitch.
Okay.
Please help us out.
ALPDOTGOV at proton.me.
But please send in your controversial leftist opinions that don't represent your organisation's perspective.
Well, the thing is,
We'd
you
love to
don't
hear them,
need an
and we'll argue about them.
intervention for having a dissent over a policy. You know what I mean? Even if in the peer process of it you call someone imperialist, I'm sure that Shoebridge and such will recover. You know what I mean?
They'll be fine. Yeah.
I'm sure they'll be struck, but they'll recover. I think you should be able to have these conversations without having some mass scale sort of intervention occur. Indeed, I have a desire to argue with you all on here. I do. And it's not because I just dislike you all. It's because I want to model for myself. I want to improve upon the process of having these
critical thinking
in public. I think historically I've been very good at going, okay, this is for public, but I think this conflict would be better handled as negotiation and moderation behind. And I've mastered that. I think I'm very good at that. Well, it's time that I get better at doing these things productively in public as well. Yeah. And I think possibly we can all do this in this space, or even with other people on here, model how to go, I think you're wrong on this, and here's what I think, but I'm not going to go fuck you and talk to you again at the end of it. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And I think at least from my perspective, that I want to do that because I have an incredible amount of respect for you folks, and I want to hear why we might disagree on a certain topic because I feel I have something to learn if we do. And we have disagreed in the past. So, and I enjoyed it. I reckon we should do some more.
You know what shits me? People keep going to me, respect. I mean, obviously we've been down to a project together. Jordan, one thing that irritates me is that I keep seeing people referring to you as a T-shirt salesperson or what have you. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I recognise it because I've had my era of being called that before. I've had my era of being called a grifter. People attack your modes of conducting your politics and your campaigns and such because they see in them the methods of their political opponents when they've decided that you've become one. Like I used to sell yard shirts. Most of those runs went to charity. I'd get people calling me someone had left people calling me like a capitalist because I was selling a bunch of T-shirts. 100%. This was just after Christchurch massacre. 100% of the shirts were going to
like commerce,
to victims.
Commerce and capitalism. One day, idiots online will learn the difference between trade and a mode of production. Don't think it's today.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's today either. I just want people to put a dead to that shit. I hate it as much as I hate the whole grifter thing. It's like it's become modern day parlance for someone to call you a grifter. Grifter is modern day shorthand for someone who is in politics who I don't agree with. And no, that is not to say there isn't a wealth of grifters in this wild west of the fucking internet. There isn't. But we can't simply call someone who's ostensibly on the left that with a different approach to it, start going, you're just in it to sell shirts and what have you. I'm sure you're not just in anything to just sell shirts. Otherwise, you would have just become a T-shirt.
Why wouldn't I just sell fucking shirts? That's yeah. It would be way easier if I just did ads and shit like that. No, it's like this shit takes time and costs a lot of money, and the T-shirts fund the website pretty much.
It's just another expression of what I think is poor form when we can have productive discussions about these things, but instead we don't. We go straight from like dead radio silence to like, oh, you're the enemy now. You're this, you're that, you're a grifter, you're the other. Well, we've got to find another way, and we really have to do it because it helps us to establish our own narrative to each other and to prospective new audiences, prospective new comrades. It lets us know that we're not shying away.
It's a very, very basic idea, actually, because we talked about agreements, but there was that whole building of consensus as well. And consensus doesn't mean everyone, everyone absolutely has to be in line, but it's coming to a point where you find the commonality, and to do that, you actually do have robust discussions, you state points. I like a whole heap of consensus building. I've been critical of the Labor Party because they don't build consensus. They enforce. You
will enjoy this. I'm doing this. It's good for you, and you have to like it, even though it's going to kill a bunch of people.
Yeah. They enforce that. Let's model healthy consensus building and discussion having.
Thank you so much for listening to the Radical Online Leftist Pipeline podcast. Mitch, take it away from here, please. We can't do this without you.
Thanks, legends. See you all next week.
See ya.
I know, right? If you've got a question you'd like to send to us, hit us up, alpdotgov@proton.me. We'd love to hear from you. Apparently, send us through your controversial leftist thoughts. I wasn't part of that, but I would love to hear it. That'll probably get us to start reading these lovely listener questions out. Thanks for listening. Share us with people that you know, especially in the lead up to the election. There's never been a more critical time to share a podcast with people. This is what happens when you let me have a final say at the end of the podcast. I'm just going to talk. I've got a lot to talk about now. Did you guys actually see, like, when the election was finally called, which they got wrong, maybe May 10th, May 3rd, it's May 3rd. But did you see when they finally made the announcement and Peter Dutton was standing in front of